Stories Foreign Affairs head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church says the finding of the true cross is a center of love, unity, and solidarity. And former U.S. Africa Bureau advisor expresses the need to break all support mechanisms for the TPLF. Hello, many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Demeke Mekonnen held talks with the Executive Director of the World Food Programme, David Beasley, in New York. According to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in the sideline of the United Nations General Assembly, Demeke met with WFP chief and discussed on the current situation in Ethiopia. During the occasion, the Deputy Prime Minister briefed the WFP official about the ongoing efforts exerted by the government of Ethiopia to address the humanitarian situation in the northern part of Ethiopia and the challenges being encountered in this regard. He also underscored the need to recognize government's unreserved efforts to enhance humanitarian aid in the region. Defending Ethiopia's national interest in the international political and economic environment should be the utmost priority of the current diplomats of the country. President Sahle-Work Zewde made this remark while sharing her vast experience in the field of diplomacy. She said diplomacy is a mission that requires skill and knowledge to safeguard national interest even in difficult circumstances. Daniel Kasahun tells you more.
The Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is in tandem with the government's reform agenda as part of its various reform activities. Of these strides, training diplomats for further actions is being underway because changing the diplomacy landscape of the country has become critical as part of the existing political and economic reforms of the country. Sharing her experiences, President Sahle-Work Zewde said diplomats must always understand and take into account the geopolitical and regional situation in all their missions.
Diplomatic mission is not to say this is right or this is wrong. Diplomats are not activists or politicians. They need to have wider scope. If narrow can't move far and achieve diplomacy. Diplomats are all-rounded and working for all. They are expected to improve themselves with comprehensive knowledge to cope with the dynamic world and act accordingly.
Defending Ethiopia's national interests in the international, political and economic environment should be the utmost priority of current diplomats in the country.
We have opportunity to learn always, but know that there is nothing beyond our country. We need to be focused. Let's come together and build our nation. If everyone takes on responsibility in his or her respective duties to work diligently, that would be a nice example in serving Ethiopia. We have a big nation with remarkable history.
State Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Birtukan Ayano, on her part said, serving the people, safeguarding the national interest of the country, and enhancing the country's dignity through the work of diplomacy is a prerequisite for national development. The 10-day training program organized to Ethiopian diplomats across the world has completed. The training transforms the overall diplomatic landscape of the nation so as to enhance the national interest of Ethiopia in the international arena.
So we're just walking to the Mexico Festival now. We're about to get past the police line. They're going to check everything. So wish us luck.
Yes,
Success! about to get interviewed by the local ENA News. Interview number 3 for Hannah. This time with EBC, which is the, I think it's the Ethiopian broadcasting division.
ድንበር የለሽ ይቅርታ ቅዱስ መጽሐፍ የእግዚአብሔር ይቅርታ ምድርን መላ ሰማያትን በእግዚአብሔር
Ethiopia is one of the top nations to have inscribed numbers of tangible and intangible world heritage to the UNESCO. Foreign Affairs head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, Dr. Abuna Aragawi said, the finding of the true cross is a center of love, unity and solidarity. Haftam Washagri has this report.
The finding of the True Cross or Meskel is celebrated across Ethiopia every year on 26 September to commemorate the finding of the True Holy Cross of Christ. Celebrations begin with the building of the Demera bonfire in Meskel Square in Addis Ababa. Talking to TV English, His Holiness Abuna Aragawi, who is Archbishop of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church Foreign Affairs Department head, expresses the visible and invisible message of the True Cross.
The cross has two signs, that is the visible sign and the invisible sign. The visible sign is like such kind of ceremony or feast. The people are gathering and commemorates the finding of the True Cross. That's very colorful and attractive. But the invisible sign, which indicates the passion, the crucifixion, the suffering of our Lord Jesus Christ, instead of all human beings.
The finding of the True Cross is one intangible heritage that has been inscribed by UNESCO at the list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2013. According to Abuna Aragawi, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has played unprecedented role to keep the original and unique tradition of the holiday to transcend it as a world heritage.
The church has played a main role, of course, for such kind of great intangible heritage because so many years ago I think the church still keeping and saving this intangible heritage. That's why the church is the owner of course this festival, but now this festival is honor of all entire world because of it's registered by UNESCO. That means this heritage is not only belong to the Ethiopian Orthodox but also belong to Africa and the entire world.
The finding of the True Cross that has been inscribed by UNESCO will bring socio-economic advantages to the country to promote the nation to the international community.
I think it has many opportunities. For instance, it has an opportunity for tourism. Many foreigners, they come to participate with this great festival. That means they can see different cultures and vestments and also different religious activities at the same time. It's the outdoor festival, therefore great people or in thousands of people or even in millions, they are celebrating together in outdoor in Meskel Square and other part of Ethiopia. This is also a good opportunity to introduce our culture, our society and our tradition and also they can visit different parts of historical places and holy places, every corner of Ethiopia. This is, I think, a good opportunity for our tourism industry.
Abuna Aragawi calls upon all Ethiopians to extend their efforts to help the needy segments in Ethiopia while observing the finding of the true cross. Meskel, the commemoration feast of the finding of the true Holy Cross of Christ, was inscribed in the UNESCO at the list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2013.
ደስ ስለሚል ጓደኛ ኢንቫይት አድርጋኝ ነው የመጣሁት።
አንዳንድ ፍየል ይዞ ወደ ወንዝ ነው የሚሄደው። በወንዝ ከባቢ እንደዚህ እንደምታዩት ሶል አድርጎ
እዚህ ላይ የተመደበው እንግዲህ ባራኪው
የሚያቃጥል ነገር ለሚወድ ሰው ግን እኔ አሁን በጣም ወጣለሁ።
እንደማ ማለት ገብርኤል አወጋሕታ ኸድና ኽንዓሰለ መዓልትና ሄልና ጀሚርናዮ ዳቦይ ብሂል ጽራይ ጥዕምናዮ እንደ ሓራስ በርቂ ሰቲናዮ እንደ ሓረር መሬት ተምሲናዮ ከምዚ ሓልፍ ሽዑ ሳዕሲዕናዮ ጥዑም ከይዱ ጥዑም ከይበልናዮ ዓብር
Welcome back. While the Mescal season continues, we find yet another unique aspect of it in the multinational southern state. Known as Yahode Meskala, this festivity provides the Hadiya with an exciting opportunity for a fresh start. A zone known for contributing to Ethiopia's intellectuals in plenty, Hadiya beams with hope and aspirations. In this one too, spicy foods, all traditional, are prepared well ahead of time and served. Wearing their red gowns and jackets spotted by black and white, the Hadiya ring out the old and ring in the new. The following piece by Binyam Alemayo sheds light into the festivity. Take a look.
Yahode Meskala is a time for fresh hopes and new beginnings. While celebrating their New Year's season, the Hadiya do blessings. Young boys herald the beginning of the New Year's season with the traditional flute. Considering inset or false banana as their lifeline, the Hadiya use it to prepare kocho or the root of inset. The women prepare a special food known as atakana. It has curing effect for patients, while at the same time helping feeding mothers gain physical strength.
በሀዲያ ብሔር የሴቶች ሙያ መለኪያ ዋናው አተካና ነውና ይሄንን መስራት ካልቻልሽ ባላታገኝም ቢያገባሽ ራሱ ይፈታሻል ነው ይያሉኝ ያሉ።
Several other dishes are also served, most of them spicy. On the day of the Yahode, elders bless the bull to be slaughtered, spreading butter on its hump. Then it's time for festivity. The specially prepared meat is eaten by the community after blessings by the elders.
በረከት ይሁን አገራችን ልምላሜ ይሁን የዘንድሮ እህል ከሌላ ዘመን ይበለጣ ይሁን
This festival is amazing. It's bigger than I could imagine. We have nothing like this, nothing this big as a religious festival in the United States. So I'm overwhelmed. It's so joyful. I feel so much love in my heart watching your people be so excited here. It's been great.
Definitely, you see a lot of different pastors and churches come from different regions, and they all have their own different designs of the crosses, and they all bring together something different from their region to here, and it brings in so much other people too, and I'm definitely excited to see for the first time the burning of the Demera.
I've come to see this because it is such an important festival for everybody in Ethiopia, and the atmosphere is unique to itself, and so never having been here before, with the opportunity to come here was one that I couldn't miss. So this is the first celebration I've seen that is of a religious nature.
I have never been a part of such an amazing spiritual and sacred event and celebration. If you could be here with me, you can just feel so much emotion and so much beauty. When I look around, you see everybody in their traditional clothes and they're wearing it with pride and with the Ethiopian materials. It's so beautiful and colorful, and the singing is so special as well.
It's a good chance to be here today and to visit the other universities in Ethiopia. I'm happy with my friends.
I have great admiration for the Ethiopian church. It is an Oriental church, and coming from Turkey, we are very familiar to the Oriental church in history. So first of all, this is very important for me, to be here. Secondly, this is an extraordinary festival. So colorful, so much representing the country as well.
The United States of America should break all support mechanisms for the TPLF. Senior advisor during the Clinton administration in the Africa Bureau of the State Department, Roger Irvin, made this remark in an exclusive interview with ETV. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's recent open letter has eloquently expressed Ethiopian sovereignty while justifying the military operation against the TPLF. The USA has, however, either failed to know this or doesn't want to acknowledge it, he has elaborated. Shifarao Lako reports.
Roger Irvin, among many other positions he assumed, was a senior advisor during the Clinton administration in the Africa Bureau of the State Department, having played important roles in some of the most crucial foreign policy events of the time. ETV has spent some time with him discussing current issues unfolding in Ethiopia. One of them was Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's recent open letter following Biden's executive order in the country. He says the letter has expressively defended Ethiopia's sovereignty.
My reading of the letter is he's trying to make the point that Ethiopia is a sovereign country. It cares about its people. It is not that the point of defending itself is to not attack the Tigrayan people in general, but to stop an illegal action by the TPLF to undermine legal authority in Ethiopia, potentially take down a democratically elected government. And I think that the that's been the prime minister has tried to explain that in many different ways, and I think that this letter is a very eloquent way to do so. And I encourage as much dialogue as possible between the U.S. and Ethiopia. And this is maybe a way to change the dialogue between the two countries and eventually get a more flow-through method of communication, and getting both the U.S. and Ethiopian government on the same page in terms of how it deals with the TPLF.
Regarding the executive order, he says it comes from failure to understand the realities on the ground in Ethiopia.
I think that they have either missed a point or they don't really know how to handle the TPLF. And so they're trying to engage both parties to come to the table. And that's not really the issue. The issue at this point is to put the screws down on the TPLF and force them to the negotiating table, and also engage all the other countries that are supporting the TPLF to come to the table with the TPLF and force them to the table so that we can get a quick solution to this. I think breaking the support mechanism for the TPLF really is the only way to do this. And I think that the US either doesn't know how to do that or doesn't want to do that for reasons I don't know, because it doesn't make any sense for the US to even have even be seen as someone that's providing equal support at equal time to the TPLF. I think it's a misunderstanding of what they should be doing, and there's probably some conflict within the government about how to do this. And the recent executive order, I think, is one that I think it's a misreading of the situation on the ground personally.
He has also called on the USA to reconsider its policy on the continent of Africa, which has been long overdue.
The recent mass massacre of civilians in Amhara region attests to TPLF's never-ending despise for the Amhara people, an author argues. TPLF's invasion of the Amhara region is the culmination of a carefully calculated genocidal plan against the Amhara people, he said. Sintayo Tamra tells us more.
US-based author Sisai Wanyo wrote on Borkana online magazine that TPLF has been scapegoating the Amhara people for everything that went wrong in pre-1991 Ethiopia. Sisai also mentioned the use of nefariously invented words by TPLF for genocidal calls against the Amhara people in Oromia, Benshangul Gumuz, Somali, and other parts of Ethiopia. And the present-day mass killings, displacements, and atrocities against Amhara people in different parts of Ethiopia are a culmination of decades of hate-mongering and indoctrination, stigmatization, and dehumanization of the Amhara people, he said. The recent mass massacre of women, children, and elderly in China town, North Ethiopia, attests to TPLF's never-ending despise for the Amhara people. Sisai attributes the current massacring of Amharas to TPLF's spoken person Getachew Redda's remarks of settling a score with Amhara elites. When TPLF started its assault on the Amhara region, it wasn't an ordinary incursion or an extension of the 8 months war in Tigray. It was rather a naked genocidal call motivated by vengeance to deprive, annihilate, displace, and starve the Amhara people. 3 months after the unconscionable atrocities were unleashed upon the Amhara people in Wollo and Gondar by TPLF's ruthless gang, the Amhara elites are nowhere to be found. While the Amhara people have been persecuted for decades, the Settle Score operation unleashed by the TPLF junta 3 months ago left tens of thousands of Amharas raped and murdered, infrastructure destroyed, and entire villages destroyed. The TPLF invasion is the culmination of a carefully calculated and long-developing genocidal plan against the Amharas, Sisai noted, and went on explaining the invasion triggered a mass exodus of close to 1 million internally displaced people, majority of them children, women, and elderly. The scale and severity of the atrocities are not yet fully known, as a significant part of Wollo is still under TPLF's siege. Sisai consolidated his arguments with remarks by Gebramedin Araya, former treasurer and top leader of TPLF, who left the TPLF and distinguished himself as a fearless and uncompromising patriotic Ethiopian truth-teller. Gebramedin says TPLF leaders taught their members, followers, and supporters that Amhara is enemy of Tigrayans and Ethiopia. Tigray was a sovereign and independent country. After Emperor Menelik's invasion, Tigray became an Amhara colony. He has with him a TPLF pamphlet that clearly explains the Amhara hatred, he said. This is the main principle of the Wayane or TPLF manifesto, which says, therefore, they must free Tigray from Amhara colonialism and establish the government of an independent Tigray Democratic Republic. The Amhara are the enemy of the Tigray people. Not only that, but Amhara are also the double enemy of the people of Tigray, he explains the manifesto. Therefore, they must hit the Amhara harder. They must annihilate the Amhara. If the Amhara are not destroyed, if the Amhara are not beaten up and uprooted from the earth, the people of Tigray cannot live in freedom. Amhara is an impediment of the government that they envisage to establish. TPLF's assault on Wollo and Gondar is a protraction of 3 decades of Amhara annihilation, massacre, displacement, and deprivation, conceived and hatched by TPLF headmongers. TPLF's assault in Wollo and Gondar is a protraction of 3 decades of Amhara annihilation, massacre, displacement, and deprivation, conceived and hatched by TPLF headmongers. The moment TPLF grabbed power in 1991, largely through the sacrification of Amhara youth and farmers, it kindled fires of hatred, enmity, and prejudice against ethnic Amharas. Using maliciously coded, dehumanizing nicknames like Naftanya, Amharas had been vilified, massacred, and displaced for the last 3 decades, the writer said.
A professor of political science at the State University of California, Alemayo Gebramariam, bashes President Biden's misguided policy towards Ethiopia. Commending Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's audacious open letter to Biden, Alemayo calls on all Ethiopians to stand by the Prime Minister in defending the country's sovereignty. Demis Mekrel looks into his commentary.
California State University political science professor Alemayo Gebramariam commends the recent PM Abiy's open letter to the White House in a personal commentary. Alemayo, who says communication between heads of state by open letter is uncommon, lauded Abiy's response to President Biden, calling it historic and extraordinary. Alemayo said PM Abiy tells Biden the way it is and the way gonna be, referring to key points in the letter. According to Alemayo, Abiy's letter to President Biden clearly states that policymakers and policy influencers who are in the pay of the TPLF will not be allowed to rule Ethiopia by remote control from Washington. Ethiopia will not be another example of spectacularly failed foreign policy as seen in Afghanistan and other countries, leaving millions in deeper despair and hardship than they were in before U.S. intervention, Abiy wrote in the letter. Noting such points in the letter, Alemayo argues Biden betrayed Ethiopia. According to Alemayo, Biden has outsourced his policy in Ethiopia to Susan Rice, who he said has long been in bed with TPLF leaders in more ways than one. Rice is puppet mastering Biden on Ethiopia policy. Biden talks the talk, but the words are Susan Rice's Professor Alamayo underscores in his commentary. Professor Alamayo went further and poses a question why Biden, who issued an executive order and repeatedly expressed deep concern by the escalating violence in Tigray, remains reluctant to hold talk with PM Abiy in person. Alamayo wonders why Biden, who talked Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa concerning the deteriorating humanitarian crisis in Tigray region, refused to talk PM Abiy, who holds the key and password to the situation in Tigray and the complex issues in the Horn of Africa. Speculating about why Biden refused to talk to Abiy, Alamayo said Biden avoids talk with PM Abiy because Abiy refuses to bow down to him. The open letter by PM Abiy shows nothing but the U.S. hypocrisy. Joe Biden, who did nothing about the widespread violations of the human rights of African Americans at the hand of brutal police officers in America, now appears to be a caretaker in Tigray humanitarian crisis. Alamayo calls it nothing but hypocrisy. As rightly stated by PM Abiy Ahmed in the open letter, Professor Alamayo Mariam underscored that Ethiopia will not succumb to consequences of pressure engendered by disgruntled individuals for whom consolidating power is more important than the well-being of millions. Alamayo says it is a matter of pride and patriotism for Ethiopians to stand against neo-colonial bullying, and proud Ethiopians will never allow Biden to make Ethiopia Africa's Afghanistan. Never and never, Alamayo concluded his commentary.
In business news, Ministry of Finance of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia welcomes the important steps taken by the Creditor Committee for a debt treatment under the G20 Common Framework to enable timely delivery of debt operation. This action will provide liquidity relief from the economic challenges created by the COVID-19 pandemic and help establish the fiscal space needed to meet development and social spending needs, while lowering the risk of debt distress rating to moderate debt service, the ministry said. The Ministry of Finance reiterated commitment to work with creditors to finalize the details of the debt treatment. The ministry recognizes the important support of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, to Ethiopia's reform process under the Extended Credit Facility, ECF, and Extended Fund Facility, EFF arrangement programs. finally, experts in the field said Africa's complex pandemic recovery will be shaped by how governments respond to innovations in healthcare, mounting debt pressures, and regional insecurities. This remark came in a Zoom meeting organized by Oxford Economics Africa and Control Risk, tabling the long-term impact of COVID-19 on Africa. Alula Teklamariam has this report.
Today, I'm really excited to talk about the launch of the Africa Risk Reward Index.
Launching the 2021 edition of the African Risk Reward Index, actors in the field suggested the need to exploit African potential to tackle the impact of COVID-19. In a Zoom meeting organized by Oxford Economics Africa and Control Risk, they said Africa's complex pandemic recovery will be shaped by the government's response to innovation in healthcare, mounting debt pressure, and regional insecurity. Presenters of the meeting explained how the Western military intervention impacts African security. They also clearly defined the challenges and possible solutions of COVID-19 pandemic on African nations.
The key point here is that the recovery from the pandemic is uneven because of how globally vaccines are being rolled out. So we're seeing far higher vaccination rates in North America and Europe, for example, than we are in Africa. I forget the exact percentage, but I believe it's in the sort of single digits, the number of people in Africa who have been vaccinated. But it's not necessarily as simple as vaccination. So we probably have to differentiate between the opening up of movement for people versus kind of economic recovery. So with low vaccination rates in Africa, we're probably going to see restrictions kind of lasting a bit longer than we're seeing them in Europe, in America, even in places like Russia and China. But if we look at kind of the African economy, and one of the points that we make in this report is that we're already seeing those green shoots of kind of that economic pushback or that economic recovery. The reward scores across Africa are beginning to increase quite nicely compared to 2020. And a lot of that is because demand for a lot of what Africa produces is coming from China, from Europe, from the, so on that front, Africa is probably recovering fairly well. But yes, recovery from the COVID pandemic is going to be highly uneven.
So one of the challenges that is being faced all around the world is where there are differences in terms of the healthcare systems that are in place. There are often differences in terms of the way the data is collected and that the vaccines are being administered. And of course, we know there are lots of different types of vaccines as well. It is around countries on a bilateral basis gaining confidence in being able to move people without extensive quarantine measures or having requirements for certain types of vaccinations in place. So we're going to see that is going to have a very long tail across the continent. And for the foreseeable future, there will be lots of challenges there in terms of both intercontinental travel, but also intracontinental travel as different economies implement different measures. And it's very unlikely that we're going to see any real consistency in the near future around how those measures are stipulated and ultimately monitored and controlled. So that's going to remain a challenge for a long time to come, I'm afraid.
According to the panelists, African governments have to reintroduce their taxation strategies to deal with COVID-19 pandemic in the continent.
But what governments can do without resorting to borrowing, well, the simple answer is really to raise more revenues domestically. And so the way to do that is, first of all, sadly for those of us based in the continent, is through taxes. So you can already see a lot of governments across the board initially had paused things like income taxes, things like corporate taxes at the early parts of the pandemic. But since the beginning of the year, we've seen some of these taxes reintroduced because governments really and truly do need the finances, both to pay back existing debt, as well as fund social development projects.
Africa is still grappling with the pandemic amidst the struggle to get more vaccine doses.
You're watching Addis News Hour, a quick reminder of the day's headlines. Foreign Affairs head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church says the finding of the true cross is a center of love, unity, and solidarity.